On the January 1973 cover of Motor Trend, a low black fastback appeared beside a question that sounded almost impossible. Was this the new Mustang? The roof and doors came from a Ford Pinto, but the nose was longer, the headlights disappeared when parked, and a turbocharged 2-liter engine made a reported 175 horsepower. The strangest part was not that this little Ford could run with imported sports cars. It was that the car did not come from Ford headquarters. It came from a California dealership. This is the Pangra, the Pinto that quietly sketched a new future for American performance. To understand why the Pangra mattered, forget everything that happened to the Pinto's reputation later and return to the start of the 1970s. Detroit's performance formula had been simple. Put a large engine in a dramatic body, advertise the quarter mile, and let cubic inches do the talking. But insurance costs were climbing, emissions requirements were tightening, and the easy horsepower of the late 60s was becoming harder to sell. The fuel crisis would add even more pressure after the Pangra appeared. A different kind of fast car was going to be necessary, even if nobody yet agreed on what it should look like. Ford introduced the Pinto as a direct answer to the small imported cars winning American buyers. It was basic transportation, not a miniature Grand Tourer. A 1972 Ford price guide listed the Pinto two-door sedan at $1,960. Its wheelbase was only 94 inches, and its standard 4-cylinder engine emphasized economy rather than drama. That humble starting point is exactly what made the next step so interesting. A light, compact rear-wheel drive car already had two qualities that every performance engineer wants. The missing pieces were power, grip, and an identity strong enough to escape the economy car label. Jack Stratton, the general sales manager at Huntington Ford in Arcadia, California, saw that possibility. Huntington Ford was not a giant engineering campus. It was a dealership, which meant Stratton could not order a clean-sheet sports car from a factory. He had to work with a car sitting on the showroom floor and build the missing personality around it. That constraint gave the project its character. The Pangra would not imitate a muscle car by forcing a V8 into the smallest available shell. It would chase speed through a lighter European-style formula. A compact body, sharper steering, more tire, a lower center of gravity, and boost. The transformation began where anyone could see it. The stock Pinto's blunt front bodywork gave way to a fiberglass nose that extended the car by roughly 10 inches. Its pointed profile drew obvious inspiration from mid-engine exotics, while manually operated hidden headlights cleaned up the shape. The original bumper and grille were integrated into the new front end, so the results still carried Ford hardware even when the silhouette looked unfamiliar. Lowered over wide wheels, the Pangra no longer read as a commuter wearing accessories. It looked like a compact American interpretation of a European sports coupe. That visual drama would have meant little if the chassis stayed ordinary. Huntington Ford offered a Spearco suspension package with stiffer anti-roll bars, adjustable Coney dampers, revised geometry, and a drop of about 2 inches. Rack and pinion steering was already part of the Pinto platform. Wider, low-profile tires gave the suspension more to work with. Period descriptions put cornering force around 0.8 of a G, a serious figure for a small road car of the era. More important than the number was the priority behind it. The Pangra was designed to carry speed through a corner, not merely create smoke between stoplights. Then came the part that made the whole idea credible. Uck Miller, already famous in American speed circles, developed the turbocharger conversion for Ford's overhead cam 2-liter 4-cylinder. The stock engine began with roughly half the Pangra's reported output. To survive boost, the Pangra specification reduced the compression ratio to 7:1 and used an O-ringed cylinder head. An AI research turbocharger fed the engine through a 2-barrel Weber carburetor, while water injection helped control detonation. Boost was limited to about 10 pounds. The advertised result was 175 horsepower from 122 cubic inches. Those ingredients sound familiar now, but in 1973 they were anything but routine. Turbo lag was real. Carburetors were difficult partners for forced induction. Water injection added another system for an owner to understand and maintain. A dealership-backed conversion also lacked the immense validation resources of a manufacturer. Yet the solution was conceptually modern. Instead of making the engine larger, Miller and Huntington Ford made each cubic inch work harder. Instead of using weight to suggest importance, the Pangra stayed close to 2,300 pounds. The complete car was more than an engine kit. A finished Pangra could include a custom dash and console, extra Stewart Warner instruments, supportive Recaro seats, a sports steering wheel, and the distinctive bodywork. For owners who did not want the full conversion, Huntington Ford divided much of the package into stages. The nose could be purchased separately. Interior and suspension components could be added. The turbo conversion sat at the top. That modular approach helped spread the Pangra look farther than the tiny number of complete dealership cars. But it also created a problem that still confuses collectors. A Pinto with the nose is not automatically a complete Huntington Ford Pangra. By the time every major component was included, the bargain Pinto was no longer a bargain. A complete Pangra was listed at about $4,600, more than twice the price of a basic Pinto. That pushed it into the territory of established sports cars. Buyers were being asked to see beyond the badge, trust an unfamiliar turbo system, and pay serious money for a car whose doors and roof still announced its economy car origin. The price was a weakness in the showroom, but it also revealed how much engineering and specialty hardware the package contained. The press test was where the idea stopped looking like a styling exercise. Motor Trend's January 1973 comparison placed the Pangra with Porsche 914s and a stock Pinto. Period performance figures reported 0 to 60 in about 7.5 seconds, and the quarter mile in roughly 15.4 seconds at 92 miles per hour. Those numbers will not shock a modern driver, but they were emphatic in a moment when many American engines were losing advertised power. The Pinto-based Special could accelerate like a real sports car, and its chassis was built for the same conversation. The result is easy to reduce to a clever headline about a Pinto embarrassing a Porsche. That misses the better story. The Pangra was not trying to prove that a cheap Ford was secretly more prestigious than a Porsche. It was demonstrating that American speed did not have to depend on a large displacement engine. Power-to-weight ratio, turbocharging, suspension tuning, and tire technology could create a different kind of performance machine. That is the idea that survived, even though the Pangra itself did not. If obscure American performance experiments are your kind of automotive history, subscribe to Classic Cars USA, because the forgotten cars often explain the famous ones. There were compromises everywhere. Contemporary reports noted turbo lag, and the manual steering demanded effort. The standard Pinto brakes were not transformed into exotic hardware just because the nose looked exotic. The low roof and compact cabin could feel tight, while the extra gauges and conversion parts added complexity. Every complete car depended on a network of specialty suppliers and a dealership willing to stand behind the package. This was not mass-produced polish. It was a bold, small-batch machine created at the edge of what early 70s hardware could do. Its timing was equally unforgiving. The Pangra arrived while performance rules were changing, but before turbocharging had become normal enough to reassure ordinary buyers. Then the fuel crisis changed the market again. Soon the Pinto name would become inseparable from a safety controversy that had nothing to do with Huntington Ford's performance experiment. The custom nose might hide the economy car's face, but it could never erase the name stamped into the underlying vehicle. A specialty car with a high price and a difficult identity had little room to survive. Even the production total refuses to settle into a clean number. Published estimates for complete Huntington Ford cars vary, and surviving paperwork is too thin to support a confident exact count. Hundreds of nose pieces may have traveled across the country, while far fewer cars received the whole package. That uncertainty is part of the Pangra's identity today. Collectors must examine the interior, suspension, turbo hardware, and known history rather than trusting the bodywork alone. Rarity gave the Pangra mystique, but incomplete records also made authenticity harder to prove. What can be proved is that the core idea was early. In 1984, Ford's own Special Vehicle Operations Group released the Mustang SVO with a turbocharged and intercooled 2.3-liter four-cylinder. Ford rated it at the same 175 horsepower figure associated with the Pangra, and paired that engine with a chassis tuned to do more than run in a straight line. The SVO was a factory-engineered production car, not a dealership conversion, but its philosophy feels familiar. Modest displacement, forced induction, careful balance, and performance measured as a complete system. That does not make the Pangra a secret prototype for the SVO. There is no need to invent a direct family tree. Its significance is more interesting than that. Jack Stratton, Ark Miller, and Huntington Ford reached for the same answer years before the factory could make that answer mainstream. They were reacting to the same pressure that would reshape performance cars across the next 2 decades. Engines could become smaller without making excitement disappear. Chassis tuning could matter as much as an impressive horsepower number. Technology could replace some of the brute force that new rules and new economics were taking away. Look at the Pangra from the front and it appears to be escaping its Pinto origins. Look at it from the side and the familiar roofline gives the game away. That tension is the whole car. It was ordinary and exotic, inexpensive at its foundation and costly when finished, crude in places and remarkably advanced in others. It could not fully outrun the limitations of its base car, but it did not need to. Its achievement was showing what a light American compact could become when someone treated it as a performance platform instead of an appliance. The Pangra lasted only a brief moment, and that may be why its lesson stayed hidden. It arrived after the classic muscle era had begun to fade and before the turbo era had a recognizable shape. Too late for one world, too early for the next. But beneath the fiberglass nose was a formula that would keep returning. Less weight, more boost, better suspension, and no apology for using 4 cylinders. The car on that 1973 magazine cover was not the next Mustang. In one important way, it was a preview of what the next generation of American performance would have to learn.